You are shoved through an iron door that groans like a dying beast. The torchlight behind you flickers once, then disappears, swallowed by stone. The air changes thick, wet, sour with rot and human breath. Chains scrape the flagstones somewhere in the black. The floor is slick beneath your boots. Slime clings like a second skin. Asterisk, your wrists burn from rope. Your crime is a handful of coins you could not repay. You lurch forward, and your shoulder scrapes a wall, rough with centuries of scratches, tiny proof that others tried to say I was here and were swallowed anyway. Overhead, water ticks from a ceiling you cannot see, a cruel clock with no end. Voices rise and fall, a cough, a hoarse prayer, a child's thin whimper that you cannot locate. You thought prison was where men pay their due and emerge reformed, but in the 14th century, this place is not built for justice. It is built for silence, for disappearance, and tonight it has claimed you. Outside these walls, the story shines. Preachers call confinement a path to repentance, a pause in life's noise where a sinner can face heaven. Chroniclers praise rulers who endow chapel corners within jails, who assign a chaplain to preach mercy behind bars. To the public eye in England and France, between the 13th and 15th centuries, prison looks like an extension of faith, part punishment, part spiritual remedy. Step inside, and the mask cracks. Municipal and royal records where they survive reveal prisons not as sanctuaries, but as warehouses for the unwanted, the drunk and the debtor, the accused thief and the suspected heretic, all poured into the same stone vats. A rhetoric of charity cloaked a mechanism meant to contain bodies, manage crowds, and frequently extract fees. Why did prisons multiply in these centuries? Cities grew, courts professionalized, authorities needed a place to hold suspects until judgment, to park debtors until payment, to stage order without fielding troops on every street. And layered over all that, a harsh arithmetic, food sold, straw rented, irons charged to the very people they restrained. Here sits the ancient paradox, cathedrals flaring with stained glass, while out of sight, a few lanes away, men and women rot in shadow. Not hypocrisy as accident, but a structure built brick by brick, line by line, in the ledgers of sheriffs and gaolers. So the question hardens like poured iron. How did a moral story become a money engine? The answer waits in parchment, stone, and breath. Records don't whisper. They list, they total, they charge. London, Newgate, c. 1315. A prison roll and related accounts mentioned payments for food, for straw, for the loosening of irons, fees attached to survival itself. Those who could pay lasted longer. Those who could not simply ceased to appear in the margins. Paris, Châtelet, c. 1380. Municipal registers indicate charges for bedding, for drawing water, even for receiving visitors. The city that sculpted the vaults of Notre Dame also ran a jail that monetized the basic act of breathing a different air. The Paris Châtelet records, Ghent, 1420. Town accounts, dry to the eye, reveal a stream of money to and from the city jail. These lines are not welfare, they are receipts coin, collected from families that could pay. Notes of losses when a prisoner died before debts were settled. Across sites, a pattern emerges like the clink of a chain looped through rings. Fees were oxygen, straw to lie on, water not fouled, a cell with less disease. Everything had a price. To be poor was to be punished twice, by the law and by the prison's economy. Behind sermons of redemption and the glow of stained glass, captivity itself was monetized. And once you see that in ink, you cannot look away, because if prisons were then human lives were the fuel. But who built the machine and why waits just ahead? Look at the prison not as ruin, but as system, each stone and rule a cog. Imagine Newgate's bulk crouched inside London's walls, Paris's Châtelet with damp substructures, Ghent's communal wards where dozens pressed together without day. None of this was accident. Architecture was policy in stone. At the top were sheriffs and magistrates, men who ordered bodies into custody and signed off on accounts. Beneath them, jailers, keepers, who controlled access to food, straw, movement, and the rare miracle of release. Beneath them again, turnkeys and guards, eyes and fists, positioned where coins could be encouraged to move. And beneath everyone, the prisoners, the debtors, and accused accused, the convicted, and merely unlucky. Incentives stitched the hierarchy together. Straw came only if paid. Chains could be loosened for a fee. Cause and effect was brutal. Poverty bred debt. Debt bred confinement. Confinement demanded fees. Failure to pay bred death. Call it corruption if you like, but not as isolated sin, more often in institutional design. A jailer who charged too little risked his position. A sheriff who tolerated generosity risked his standing. Within these incentives, cruelty was not a glitch. It was frictionless. Stand in a general ward in your mind's eye. Air heavy with human damp. Bodies layered on straw that was fresh yesterday and foul today. A man shivers, not from confession, because he cannot afford the bundle that would keep the stone from leaching his heat. Another sinks toward fever, because his family cannot bribe a move to a cleaner cell. Architecture signals power. Hierarchy delivers obedience, and fees serve as lifeblood. And still, what awaited inside went beyond stone and coin. It entered the realm of hunger, disease, violence, and silence, and that descent begins now. The first enemy is hunger. In many late medieval jails, food was not a ration, but a market. Surviving records from Newgate and other sites indicate starvation, rations, crumbs, or thin gruel were available when payment flowed or when AMS were specifically directed. Without family coin, the bowl often stayed empty. Scope note. Practices varied by locale and year. Records suggest frequent monetization. Hunger served policy as well as neglect. A belly gnawing itself dulls revolt and accelerates resolutions, confessions, payments, compliance. Guards knew this, and scraps were priced like luxuries. A richer prisoner might purchase a seat by a slit of air. A poorer one hoped a neighbor would share stale bread. Children could be confined alongside adults, in some cases aging double in the dark. Hunger is quiet. It does not clatter or scream. It pares you down until you are mostly bones and will until your body becomes a ledger of unpaid lines. You count the drips. You count your breaths. You daydream about bread. But hunger is only the beginning. The second enemy is disease. In communal wards, toadies and vermin share space. Lice burrow. Fleas hop. Wounds fester from irons rub. Human waste pools in corners. Damp chews at lungs. Typhus thrives where clothes never fully dry. Dysentery arrives like a thief and takes the weakest first. Accounts associated with Paris's Châtelet describe stench rising into streets. Municipal notes refer to wards cleansed not by medicine but by death. Money could buffer a little. A bribe might move you to a smaller chamber nearer a slot of air. But contagion does not read ledgers. The well-born debtor and the beggar cough in the same rhythm. Even illness becomes a currency. Jailer selling a transfer towards cleaner straw. To die nameless in the dark is free. You listen to the coughs counting off the night like drums, and still worse waits in the shadows. When stomachs are empty and fevers run, the third enemy rises: violence. In worlds where law's gaze is intermittent, the stronger, well-connected jailer sell protection. If your kin have coin, a guard's glance follows you. If not, you are thrown to the ward, where desperation is a trade. Town records from late medieval Flanders hint at brawls when scraps arrive, at riots when scarcity tips from insult to annihilation. Stronger men claim the space near air. Weaker ones curl by the damp wall. Guards intervene when their interests do. A fight can justify a new fee. Peace can be purchased for an hour. Violence, in this calculus, is not random. It's a service permitted, priced, withdrawn. You learn how to make yourself smaller. You learn which shadows to avoid. And then the fourth enemy arrives. The one that does not bruise the body so much as erase the self. Beneath grand towers and communal wards, some prisons had isolation, cells narrow, damp, and often unlit. The label oubliette, from oubliette, to forget, is applied to certain vertical shafts in castles. Modern scholarship notes that some were indeed used for isolation, while others likely served storage or drainage. Where isolation was used punitively, the formula was simple: remove sound, remove light, remove time. Inside such spaces, the world shrinks to breath and drip. A smear. You hum to keep your mind from eventually you stop humming because the sound proves nothing. Sometimes families could pay to have a prisoner raised for air. Sometimes no one came. To hunger is to feel body. To disease is to feel mortality. To silence is to feel yourself thinning. Thought by thought. You are not punished for your crime now. You are punished into vanishing. But a cruelty colder than stone awaits in winter when the ledger meets the man. Courtroom is cold, though not as cold as the corridor beneath it. You stand before the bench. Early 15th century London. Your tunic is thin. Your hands tremble. Not with guilt, but with lack. You stole nothing. You killed no one. You owe a man money. You do not have money that seemed small until the world made it enormous. The sheriff reads the charge in ritual monotone. The scribe dips his quill. He records your name, the sum, the order. He does not record your daughter's cough, your wife's hunger, your mother's hands gone raw from scrubbing linen. The sentence is expected, committed to Newgate, until debt is resolved. The gavel taps small sound, enormous consequences. Your freedom is not only gone, it is collateral. You are marched through a city alive with winter markets, through steam rising from pies you cannot taste. Chains bite as you walk. A boy stares and is pulled away by a mother who knows stairs cost. At Newgate's gatehouse, your arrival is an entry. Irons fee. Admit if your family can pay, the irons may be loosened. If not, they live on your skin. You step into the ward. The new logic on straw in the corner fee. Space near the slit fee. Water fee. Gruel fee. Each coin your wife brings buys you another day and sells some piece of her life. Perhaps she pawns her cloak. Perhaps your son begs by perhaps your neighbor promises to lend and does not. There is always a moment when your family thinks, we are close. The creditor will be satisfied next week. Your debt is almost paid. Then the jailer presents another ledger. Arrears for food, for straw, for irons charges that outgrew the first sum. Your wife argues softly because loudness costs. The turnkey taps the page and a calculus shudders through your body. Even freedom will cost more than you thought. Freedom carries fees trailing like chains. The last bowls of gruel, the final straw bundles, the key turned in your lock. At last, the door opens. The city air hits like a slap. Your wife's smile is a tear that never learned to fall. You are thinner. She is, too. She presses into your palm the coin that should buy bread, but it buys a ride home because you are weaker than you knew. You step into daylight thinking you have won. You have not. You carry new debts to neighbors, to the man who extended credit so your wife could save you, to the work you missed and now cannot regain. You were not reformed. You were recycled through intake, through fees, through release into a poverty deeper than before. Behind you, the door thuds, and another man enters. His wife still believes saving him will not ruin them both, and Newgate was not alone. Across Europe, the arithmetic repeated, though not everywhere and always the same. The pattern echoes, though details shift with place. York Castle, 1370. A jail delivery roll lists the names of those released and next to them, fees due to the jailer. The roll reads like a receipt book with people attached. Lübeck, 1465. The Hanseatic city's account books preserve entries for prisoners, not as wards of care, but as lines of revenue and cost. In a trading hub where coin speaks, the prison also speaks in coin. Paris and London, late 14th-15th C. Occasional alms appear in records. A bishop funds bread on a holy day. A wealthy donor pays a handful of straw beds for the poor. These moments complicate the picture without erasing it. Historians debate emphasis. Were these prisons designed as instruments of suffering, or were they bureaucratic organisms whose neglect and incentives produced cruelty without anyone needing to say it aloud? Surviving evidence suggests both forces at work, varying by city and year. Some terms, oubliettes, for instance, require nuance. Not every vertical shaft was punitive, though isolation cells did exist, and later memory muddied the view. Early modern summaries sometimes sanitized medieval accounts to frame confinement as necessary order. Public pamphlets abridged starvation and disease into generic hard conditions. The effect was not a grand conspiracy so much as a habit of curation, emphasizing order, minimizing squalor. So the question persists: intent or outcome, malice or mechanism? The answer may be less tidy than either. What is clear is the effect: thousands of lives measured as numbers that could be zeroed out. The margins hold their names until the ink stops, and the darkest thread has not yet been pulled. Fear and profit interlock, and the machine reveals its purpose. Step back. Let the anchors assemble. Newgate's fees, the Châtelet's charges, Ghent's receipts, York's release with payment, Lübeck's account lines. Individually they look like administrative debris. Together they outline something colder. A prison economy that did not need constant cruelty, to be cruel. Even if we grant that some jailers performed kindnesses, that some sheriffs tolerated extra bread, the machine leaned toward extraction. Every incentive pulled in the same direction. Monetize time, sell relief, price, dignity. A jailer who gave straw for free became a jailer who struggled. A magistrate who opened hands became a magistrate accused of weakness. Structures nudge as brutally as fists. Revenue is one pillar. Fear is the second. The walls themselves speak, looming over markets, casting the shadow of consequence across narrow lanes. You do not need an executioner in every square. When the prison keeps the message alive, you can disappear. You can be held until coins change hands that no longer exist. The third pillar is control. By cycling the poor, the indebted, and the accused through confinement, authorities can manage unrest without building scaffolds every dawn. The jail becomes both cage and sin. The city survives because someone else is swallowed. Notice how each enemy helped the machine. Hunger pacified, disease thinned, violence created an internal tiered market for safety. Silence erased evidence. When families did save someone, the price often pushed them into ruin, feeding the very debt that filled the wards. Release could stoke the next confinement. This is the chill. From the perspective of the people who benefited, the prison was not broken. It worked. It produced revenue lines, dispensed fear, and stabilized streets. It taught lessons about limits without constant spectacle. The jailer's key and ledger became as potent a symbol of authority as a bishop's crozier or king's sword. So do we need a mastermind at the top for this to be designed? Perhaps not. A system can be designed by incentives. People push where it pays. Rules remain that favor the pusher. The outcome suffering patterned across years is indistinguishable from intent. Picture the debtor we have followed. His departure looks like victory to his child, like balance cleared to the jailer, like order maintained to the sheriff. One family's devastation appears as civic success to the ledger. That is the final revelation. Medieval prisons were not primarily about sin and redemption, nor even strictly about guilt and innocence. They were about endurance of power and of the structures that feed it. And the echo this leaves is not medieval alone. Return to the scratch on the wall you felt in the dark, the desperate groove of someone proving they were. That gouge is the truest record, because in many surviving ledgers, prisoners are not fathers or wives. They are fees, arrears, expenses. Humanity dissolves into arithmetic. Pain becomes a number to be crossed out. This is how systems hide themselves, by rebadging cruelty as procedure. Hunger becomes a supply problem. Disease becomes a cleaning line item. Violence becomes order maintenance. Silence becomes isolation. And once the words are tidy, the world tolerates outcomes it would call monstrous if they wore their true names. Why does this medieval story matter now? Because it shows how structures once built do not need whips to endure. They need only indifference, and a book where numbers make sense to the comfortable. The jail teaches a lesson beyond its century. When incentives reward suffering, suffering repeats. When dignity is priced, dignity declines. Listen closely, and you may still hear him. The debtor finding daylight, the child who counted drips, the woman who pawned her life to rescue a man only to discover he could not stay rescued. Their voices do not carry in parchment, they carry in corridors. In every echoing stone hallway, we hear the price of unchecked power. And if you think this is where the darkness ends, the next door waits. If you think this was brutal, know that the story does not end at Newgate's gatehouse or beneath the Châtelet. The next chapter unfolds where the machinery of control fuses with faith in inquisitorial chambers, where silence is a weapon, not just a void, and where the goal is not fees or delay, but confession crafted by design. That journey asks a sharper question. When authority believes it is saving souls, what limits remain? If this episode opened your eyes, stay with us. Subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments, and tell us which hidden corners of history you want to unseal next. Because the past is not buried, it waits in the shadows, and the next shadow leads straight into the dungeons of the Inquisition.